My name is Jens Christian Grøndahl. I'm the author of the novel As of Tonight I'm Sleeping on the Roof. This book is basically about relationships and about memory. It's about how we attach to other people. It's about a relationship that goes back to the youth of our main characters, and which is followed up in the present when they confront themselves with themes of the day. There's a Me Too theme in the book, but there's also the eternal theme of rediscovering love and discovering how your life was actually taking shape and what influenced you back then. The main idea of this book came to me with a wish to dwell on my youth back in the 80s and what it was like to be a young man in Copenhagen back then. This is from the opening of As of Tonight I'm Sleeping on the Roof. It was a Saturday, and when I emerged again, the twilight was teeming with people. My life was only just commencing, and today I have but a faded sense of the young man I was on the far side of all these years. Perhaps he makes his way to Østerport station to take an S-train to Svanemøllen, but it could also be that he's elected to proceed on foot. In that case, he's walked past the American embassy and the lakes, where the evening sky would at this moment be reflected through the trees along the shore. There's much that changes, but even more that doesn't change. There's also a gender theme because the main character has a daughter who is pregnant with her first child, and they have this discussion about knowing or not knowing the gender of the child, which causes a small conflict because the main character has trouble understanding this gender issue, which is part of today's agenda. And because of this theme, their relation suddenly turns sour. It's one example of how something in public debate sort of invades your intimate sphere and sometimes disturbs your most intimate relations. To my mind, the Me Too movement is probably the most important cultural revolution in many, many years, because for 100 years we have tried to reach equality between men and women on the political level, and also in terms of law and social integration. But with the Me Too movement, it's a question of equality in our minds, of how we see each other, how we relate as men and women. That's why I think we're only beginning to understand the importance of what is going on these days. And I didn't want to describe this in a man, I wanted to describe it in a woman. What happens in a woman who discovers how this public thing, which the Me Too movement is, what happens when it invades her private sphere, her innermost thoughts and feelings. That was what really interested me. As a male writer, as a male middle-aged white writer, I have often written about women and imagined the thoughts and feelings of women. And it's not that I claim to know all about people with another gender, but I often felt how the imagination of literary language allowed me to know more than I thought I did, to actually put myself in the place of somebody else, somebody with a different gender, with a different experience. I would say it's like a counterfactual autobiography in the sense that I imagine how my life might have been, especially when we come to the second part of the book, which takes place in the present and where the main character is in his 60s, like I am. At that point, the novel becomes pure fiction, but it has its roots in my own experience, and I wouldn't have been able to write it without employing or drawing on personal experience and personal emotions and the remembrance of emotions of time past, like the ones described in the first part. Not only in terms of outward enemies, but also in terms of a public debate where we have less understanding, less will to actually imagine the other, to actually understand the reasons why somebody says what he or she says. So I believe that novels can be small gardens of peaceful conversation and friendly reflection in a time of hostility and threat.